What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a few things to discuss with you today. We have those areas of interest out in the Atlantic, as well as the more main meat of the video that's becoming kind of more hot news as of recently, which is kind of what's been going on in the main development region with that potential area of interest that's going to be tagged and that tropical wave that's going to be coming up. So we're going to be talking about that all right here in this video today. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right now. So what we have for you right here is the National Hurricane Center's latest public advisory for you guys in the tropics. We do have post-tropical cyclone Dexter. We're not going to be covering it anymore. It's just out there. Thanks for being around, Dexter, but you're now post-tropical cyclone. Still, shipping concerns are a bit worrisome, so we'll have to pay attention to that, but we have two areas to talk about over here, and then we'll get towards the main meat of the video. This is the first one. We have a 20% chance of formation. We're going to go ahead and read this off. A non-tropical area of low pressure is expected to form over the next day or two, a few hundred miles offshore of North Carolina. Some tropical or subtropical development is possible this weekend while the system moves northeastward over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream off the east coast of the United States. By early next week, the low is expected to reach colder waters and more hostile conditions, ending its chances of tropical or subtropical development. 10% chance in the next 48 hours, 20% in the next 7 days. So we're going to want to pay attention to that over there, mainly for rip currents and those areas right there. This was expected to head towards the Carolinas coast, as we talked about yesterday, but it's being pulled by Dexter over here out to sea, so that's kind of some good news for those tuning in the East Coast. But we also have to watch this area of interest, which is Invest 96L right here, and we'll go ahead and discuss this as well. A tropical wave over the central tropical Atlantic is producing disorganized shower activity. Environmental conditions are forecast to be more conducive for gradual development in a few days, and a tropical depression could form late this weekend or early next week across the Atlantic while the system moves northwestward or west-northwestward over the central tropical and subtropical Atlantic. 60% in the next 7 days, but we're now down to 10% in the next 48 hours. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. This is more of a long-term threat, I've noticed, and we'll have to watch how the system evolves. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into satellite imagery and some modeling. Starting with satellite imagery, looking at Invest 96L at this current point in time, it is pretty disorganized. You do have some convection that's kind of sustaining itself on the western side of it, but it's remained relatively limited, and it needs to kind of wrap around it. It needs to kind of sustain itself across the area of interest right here before it even has a chance to get designated. We do have some dry air in that region. We can go ahead and show you that. There is some dry air to the north of it. Actually, we'll go ahead and go back to about 30 frames just to show you this more comprehensively, but you do have some dry air to the north of it, but that dry air is getting mixed out, and ultimately you're going to want to watch to see how the system evolves. It's kind of lacking in organization right now, which is why I think the NHC dropped this from a 30% in the next 48 hours down to a 10%. Doesn't mean the long-term threat's going away. It just means that it's going to take more of its time to develop, and it does have a lot of time to spare, and the NHC is going at this current point, okay, it may not be developing right now, but it's still likely going to develop at some point. We're just going to want to watch this, and in my opinion, this is likely not going to develop until it moves out of the main development region due to better conditions, due to more water temperatures. There's better water temps, there's better sea surface temps, like I said. There's also better ocean heat content, and the wind shear is going to continue to collapse in that period of time. So those are all factors that we are watching at this current point. Now we can go ahead and kind of take a quick look at the current storms for Invest 96L. Brought to you by Tropical Tidbits. As of 1800 UTC, which is 2 o'clock Eastern Time, its maximum sustained winds are 25 knots or 30 miles per hour. Its minimum central pressure is 1,011 millibars. Radius of maximum winds is 60 nautical miles. We do have some track models and some intensity models. This is the first time we can actually show you these right here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Track models, majority of them keep it out to sea, although Bermuda, you're going to want to watch this in the next week or so as the system continues to evolve. We're going to want to pay attention to that as well. Looking at the intensity models, they have reduced in intensity quite a bit. When this first went online and this first became an invest, this kind of showed potential hurricane strength with these ensembles. I can go ahead and move this over just a little bit to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at now. And as you can see, what we're seeing right here is still the potential for it to be a strong tropical storm at this current point, but hurricane contention is a little bit not in the cards right this current point. I still think it has a possibility of it, but there are a few things that are kind of limiting it at this current point in time. First of all, the system is becoming a bit more broad and is expected to broaden out more before it starts to head towards the Atlantic basin, and that might slow its development as well as kind of cap off the intensity. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. That's the main thing we're watching. Also, conditions are not as good right now as that we were kind of anticipating in that part of the MDR, but at this current point, based on the forecasts and based on the short-term forecasts, they are expected to get better and better and better. The wind shear is expected to subside. You're going to see more moisture moving through the region, and obviously warmer sea surface temperatures to boot. So those are all factors that you're going to want to consider, and we'll keep you updated on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But moving on to the main meat of the video for today, we have quite a few things to discuss. Starting off right here, back to satellite imagery, what we have going on across the Atlantic is we're looking at, in the next couple of days, we're looking at a tropical wave expected to come off the coast of Africa. In fact, I think that's the start of it over here on the eastern end of this map right here. That's going to be coming off the coast of Africa. It's looking like it has a really good chance of organization and development heading into the main development region. And according to the forecasts I've seen, it looks like it's going to take its time organizing and developing. And then as it heads towards the Lesser Antilles, then it's going to start getting its act together. Matter of fact, this is actually the same wave that the Climate Prediction Center highlighted as a greater than 40% risk in the Atlantic. This is actually the highest probability for tropical development that the Climate Prediction Center has put all year so far in the Atlantic, and it's for this particular wave that's coming off the coast of Africa. The models are really having a field day with this. The models are really concerned about especially the long-term impacts as this potentially heads towards the Caribbean, towards the Lesser Antilles, towards the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, and potentially the East Coast or Gulf Coast of the United States. So we need to go ahead and break down, okay, what are the conditions that are going to be happening, and what kind of scenarios are possible at this current point? Because I think at this point, the models at this point are screaming that something big is going to happen, but given what's happened over the last little while, I want to dive into the conditions and go, okay, what do the models like, and why are they screaming this kind of development at this current point in time? So this is the first thing that the models are starting to like. What we have right here is the sea surface temperatures. This is quite the setup we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. In the Western Atlantic, we have 29 plus degrees Celsius water temperatures from 32 to 33 degrees north, just off the coast of Bermuda, all the way down to the Caribbean. I never thought I would see something like this in August. That is a huge concern for me, because what that ultimately does is it allows for more fuel, allows for more of these temperatures, water temperatures for hurricane development, not to mention the environmental concerns that I have, especially around Florida, which we'll get to in a second. But this is a huge problem. And I remember Greg talking to me about this. He mentioned this in one of the comments he was talking about. He was out deep sea fishing in the Atlantic Basin near the Gulf Stream. The fish that are out there, their guts and their gills are very red, which indicates a large amount of stress. And that's kind of a reaction to the very warm sea surface temperatures that we have over there. If the fish are feeling it, the tropical waves and the potential hurricanes that we see this season are definitely going to feel it as well. So you're going to want to pay attention to that as well. But starting off in the main development region, as the wave starts to come off the tropical African continent right here, it's going to be an area of about 27 degrees Celsius of water, which I think is part of the reason why it's not having it develop right away. Don't get me wrong, it's still plenty of warm water. That's 80.6 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in the United States. But ultimately, those aren't the best water temps. Those are further to the west in the western part of the main development region and in the Atlantic Basin as well as in the Caribbean. So we're going to want to pay attention to this. But the big thing I'm concerned about, not just with this, but also potentially what's going to be happening later this month when we potentially start seeing the Central American gyre start to wake up, is what's going to be happening in the Gulf. The Gulf is over 30 degrees Celsius, over 86 degrees Fahrenheit across a lot of this region. In fact, you're looking at you're looking at up to 32 degrees Celsius off the Florida coast right here. That is a huge concern to me, and that's something you're going to want to pay attention to right there, especially in terms of development and in terms of intensification, if we even get that far. But we'll have to hold our horses with that. At this current point, we'll have to see what's happening, but at least based on the water temperatures alone, the models are really loving this, and that's why they're kind of going ham with this. But that's not the only factor. We also have ocean heat content we need to take a quick gander at. Here's your OHC right here. OHC continues to be very concerning across much of the Atlantic. Across the western main development region, in fact, where the current tropical wave Invest 96L is right now, where it's at right now, I believe it's around right here. And it's going to be moving very shortly into 50, potentially 75 OHC as it moves more to the northwest and moves into these better conditions that I was talking about earlier. This is part of it right here. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. Another thing that you're going to want to consider too is as this wave comes off the coast of Africa and then it moves through towards the Antilles, part of the reason it's not going to develop right away is because of the ocean heat content too. We're looking at 25, maybe a little bit of 50 in a few isolated areas OHC. That's okay, but that's not particularly the most favorable for development. But 50, 75, 100, 125, that's very favorable for development. And that's something you're going to want to keep in mind as well. Also taking a quick look at the wind shear, let's go ahead and show you that right now. Wind shear is also going to be pretty interesting to say the very least. Here's your shear map that we have pulled up for you right here. This is the European. So basically what we have, at least for 96L, there is a little bit of wind shear to its northwest right here, but that's not going to particularly be that big of a problem. It really needs to detach from the wind shear more so to the southeastern part of it, which it is expected to do in the next couple of days. But across the western Atlantic, the wind shear is continuing to fall apart, and yes, you do have a bit of a surge of shear coming up in parts of the Caribbean right here, but that's not going to last very long. And look at this. This is 4 to 5 days out. Across much of the tropical Atlantic, especially with what we have going on with this area of interest that potentially may be coming off the coast of Africa with that wave. Across the entire Atlantic, there is very favorable shear conditions. That is a very big concern for me. Before, there was always one thing that was a little bit out of place. It doesn't look like, at least the basic conditions, they're really that out of place at this current point. There are some stability issues that still need to be worked with at this current point, but from what I've seen from the modeling, it looks like those stability issues, especially with the Hadley cell, which is kind of that cell that populates the tropics, that is going to be weakening, and that's going to be becoming more favorable for tropical development. That is something you're going to want to pay attention to. And then especially down the road, as we get to like maybe 7 days out, yes, you do have a little bit of quote-unquote shear over here, but as we'll show you in a second, that's less shear and more the winds that the storm is producing in the upper levels. So I do want you to keep that in mind as this wave starts to organize and develop and then moves potentially through the Antilles or the Caribbean or wherever. There's not really that much shear that's going to stop it at this current point. And then we'll have to look at the moisture component to all of this. What's the moisture doing, Patrick? Moisture at this current point, yes, like I said, there is some dry air in northwest of Invest 96L, but that's getting mixed out pretty quickly. You're going to want to pay attention to how that pans out, but as we start to see this tropical wave come off the coast of Africa, it's going to be in a pretty robust moisture pocket, and the dry air that's currently over parts of the MDR, it's not really going to be that big of a concern, especially as this convection is expected to sustain itself as it heads towards the Lesser Antilles, and then starts to get its act together. And yes, dry air does surround it, but that's not going to be too big of an issue if it can maintain itself, and the Europeans definitely not finding that as well. The Europeans also having the next system after that potentially developing as it heads towards the Atlantic Basin. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll have to check on the other runs to kind of verify that, but the fact that we're seeing this switch on the models is pretty telling to say at the very least. So now, the moment you've all been waiting for, let's go ahead and get to the model runs to show you what's going on. We'll show you the 0Z European and then the 12Z, since that's out on pivotal weather, and then we'll go to the GFS. Here's the European that we have pulled up for you. Right here, the Europeans kind of backed off on Invest 96L, mainly because of how broad it's expected to become, but there is a possibility it could merge with this low-pressure system over here off the coast of Newfoundland right here, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. But the main thing we're going to be watching is this right here. In the next couple of days, the next 24 to 48 hours, that tropical wave is going to be coming off the coast of Africa, moving through the main development region, and already you have a low-pressure system being marked right here as it starts to slowly organize and develop, then detach from the intertropical convergence zone, and then start heading towards the Lesser Antilles. It's not expected to develop right away, but it is expected to start developing as it approaches that region. That's tropical depression strength as it approaches Puerto Rico, getting up to tropical storm strength as it moves through Hispaniola. Kind of sustains itself, actually. Kind of reminds me, it's a little bit of a similar track to Hurricane Laura, actually, back in 2020 by the time we get to this point out. But granted, this is 13 plus days out by the time we talk about this, so please do take it with a grain of salt. But the fact that we're seeing this so consistently over the period of several days, and this isn't like a day and then it falls apart. This has been consistent over the course of the last 4 or 5 days as well. This is something you're going to want to pay attention to if you're in the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, and the United States. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. And then the European has this system entering the Gulf region right here, while another hurricane starts to head towards Bermuda right here. I'll need to cross-check that because I have serious doubts with that one. But with that being said, that's your 0Z European. Looking at the 12Z for right now, the 12Z European is definitely something you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward, and we don't really have that much we can do in terms of showing you regions and all that stuff. Like, we can't zoom out of this, but this is probably enough. This is already a week out at the 12Z right here, but the 12Z isn't really slowing down either, although the track is a little bit different. So this is 7 days out right here. Let's go to 8 days out. 8 days out, it's still a relatively broad but very robust tropical wave as it approaches the Lesser Antilles. Then as we get to 9 days out right here, it's consolidating pretty quickly as it moves north of those regions. There's still going to be some impacts right there, tropical storm force winds over the Antilles and Puerto Rico in this run right here, 9 days out. 1,005 millibar tropical storm is not something to fool around with. That can still cause quite a bit of damage. And then as you start to get towards 10 days out north of Hispaniola, this is already nearing or at hurricane strength right here, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. Then 11 days out, this is continuing to strengthen as it moves towards the Bahamas and the southwestern Atlantic, and because of how great and how ripe the conditions are for tropical development in that region, I would not be surprised if we see that kind of rapid intensification and rapid development that we're going to see in a second. Because as we're going to see 12 days out, boom, 973 millibar system approaching Florida right here. Then 13 days out, it's moving towards Florida, making landfall right there. 965 millibar system as it makes landfall. I believe that's in Broward County. This is 300 hours out. Please do keep that in mind. The 0Z European had it more so towards the Gulf and further south than the 12Z does. So please keep in mind that variability. I just wanted to highlight that for you guys very quickly, because now we have the early returns for the 12Z European. Now showing you the GFS to kind of to complement that. Let's pull that up very quickly. Here's the 12Z GFS for you guys right here. GFS kind of takes its time to organize and develop right here, but there is a bit of a change right here I do want to show you right here, and why I have issues with the 12Z GFS as well. The 12Z GFS has this system mainly staying out to sea as it's organizing and intensifying. The reason for that is because the GFS wants Invest 96L to organize and strengthen up to pretty strong hurricane status and yank this further up to the north. So I do have some problems with that, but the 0Z GFS definitely has this heading towards the Caribbean, and moving through there, heading south the islands right there. So we have a lot that we kind of need to dissect some more. The models are kind of agreeing more and more, and we're seeing other operational runs like the Canadian pick up on it as well. So we'll have to keep you updated on all of those threats right there. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.